In this video, we're going to talk about Sam Altman and his recent interview on the All In podcast. Sam Altman and OpenAI have exploded over the last 2 years. They went from him being fired to him coming back. And this interview is one of his first interviews back. And I believe it's extremely important in the digital landscape, in the technology landscape, and in the social media landscape. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to dig into the entire interview and talk about why these conversations, what he's saying, and how that's important to leaders as we look to the future, and how we begin to integrate AI more into our businesses, into our organizations moving forward. So let's dig into this interview together. Hey there, if we haven't met yet, I'm Nils Smith, your social media guide, and I help leaders maximize social media and new technology. And a lot of the focus over the last year has been on AI. And I've looked at a lot of different software tools that are coming out and available. And there is no more important company, I believe, to follow and to monitor, and technology specifically to pay attention to than chatgpt in this world. They are the leaders in this space. And Google's doing some interesting stuff. I think Amazon's got some stuff on the horizon. Meta has prioritized AI into the future, but AI has continued to lead the way. And Sam Altman, as the leader of OpenAI, I believe is one of the most important voices and leaders and innovators in this space. And so I believe this is a really insightful conversation. I listened to it this weekend, and I thought, you know what, there's some just nuggets out of this that I want to dig into and talk about here on this YouTube channel. So let's jump right into this podcast, and I'll pause it in between and share my thoughts and what I believe we can take away from what he shares, because there's a lot of things he doesn't say and he can't say, but I think there's some things that we need to listen closely to and begin to understand where this technology is going and how we can be prepared for what's coming and how we can begin to integrate these technologies effectively and efficiently into our organizations.
Experimental fund that Sam and I were part of as Scouts is Sequoia's highest multiple returning fund. A couple of low digit millions turned into over 200 million, I'm told. And
really?
Then he did, that's what I was told by Ruloff, And he did a stint at Y Combinator, where he was president from 2014 to 2019. In 2016, he co-founded OpenAI with the goal of ensuring that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. In 2019, he left YC to join OpenAI full-time as CEO. Things got really interesting on November 30th of 2022. That's the day OpenAI launched ChatGPT. In January 2023, Microsoft invested $10 billion. In November 2023, over a crazy 5-day span, Sam was fired from OpenAI. Everybody was going to go work at Microsoft. A bunch of heart emojis went viral on X/Twitter. And people started speculating that the team had reached artificial general intelligence. The world was going to end. And suddenly, a couple days later, he was back to being the CEO of OpenAI. In February, Sam was reportedly looking to raise $7 trillion for an AI chip project. This, after it was reported that Sam was looking to raise $1 billion from Masayoshi-san to create an iPhone killer with Johnny Ive, the co-creator of the iPhone. All of this while ChatGPT has become better and better and a household name. It's having a massive impact on how we work and how work is getting done. And it's reportedly the fastest product to hit 100 million users in history in just 2 months. And check out OpenAI's insane revenue ramp up. They reportedly hit $2 billion in ARR last year. Welcome.
Okay, so let's just stop right there. And, the few key things to notice here and that they mentioned. One, I just got to say, I love the All In podcast. There are a few podcasts that I listen to pretty much every episode of, and this is one of those podcasts. And so they're really on the forefront of new technology and investing and business and culture and politics and some really interesting things. So I want to highly recommend the All In podcast as a great listen every week and to the leaders that are on and a lot of the interviews that they do. But he talks about how when, OpenAI is one of the fastest growing technology from an adoption standpoint in the history of technology. And those of us who have kind of lived through the internet, social media, and the explosion of TikTok and some of these platforms that have grown tremendously fast, this is faster than anything else we've ever experienced in history from an adoption standpoint. And then he goes on to talk about when Sam Altman left, everyone is going to go to Microsoft. And I think this is an important note that in many ways, while OpenAI isn't owned by Microsoft, Microsoft is very involved both as an investor in OpenAI and an integrator into OpenAI. And so I would in some ways almost consider OpenAI as a part of Microsoft. And so where we look at Gemini being, Google's AI system that is fully integrated into Google. And, we look at, Llama and, Facebook or Meta AI being their big investment. Microsoft is investing through OpenAI and integrating very closely with OpenAI. And so I think that connection is important as we look to the future of this technology and who is involved in what and where we're going to be aligned. And then the other thing is that basically people perceive ChatGPT to be this free tool that's available online in app. Their free version is incredible, but they're also making a lot of money. Now, practically, as I understand, they're still losing money. Their spend is higher than their revenue. And so they still have a burn rate and things they've got to figure out from a revenue model standpoint. But they have figured out how to make money. And just to grow that fast in annual revenue is just unbelievable. And so, yeah, it's pretty impressive what Sam Altman has done through OpenAI and how fast they're growing. So let's get back to the interview.
To the All In podcast, Sam Altman.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Sachs, you want to lead us off here?
Okay, sure. I mean, I think the whole industry is waiting with bated breath for the release of GPT-5. I guess it's been reported that it's launching sometime this summer, but that's a pretty big window. Can you narrow that down? I guess where are you in the release of GPT-5?
We take our time on releases of major new models, and I don't think I think it will be great when we do it, and I think we'll be thoughtful about how we do it. Like we may release it in a different way than we've released previous models. Also, I don't even know if we'll call it GPT-5. What I
just gonna pause it there real quickly. When they did this interview, they had not yet released ChatGPT 4.0, which is not 4.0, 4, and then the O, the letter O. And you might have seen some of the releases that have come out where it's almost more like an Alexa for ChatGPT, but it can do a lot more things for you, and it's free and accessible to everyone. And so it's one of the things that ChatGPT just keeps getting better, and it's able to use things like your camera, and it's able to use more video integration, and it's more voice driven. And so instead of being text input, text output, it's now voice input, video output, or graphics output, or it's more conversational in nature, more natural conversation, not just text conversational. So he's not talking about that here because it hadn't yet been released in this interview. And so just timing, I think, was tough there of, you can see him kind of avoiding that, but he is speaking to, we're constantly looking to innovate. We're trying to be thoughtful with our releases and moving quickly, but making sure everything is well baked before we release it to the public.
What I will say is, a lot of people have noticed how much better GPT-4 has gotten since we've released it, and particularly over the last few months. I think that's like a better hint of what the world looks like, where it's not the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but you use an AI system, and the whole system just gets better and better fairly continuously.
And I just want to add in here, as a ChatGPT 4 user, as I think about all my different subscriptions that I use professionally, the $20 a month I spend on, I think it's what I spend on GPT-4 it's probably the last one I would cancel. I mean, maybe my Google Suite with Gmail and Google Drive is maybe the very last one, and then GPT-4 being the next one. It is such a valuable tool for the work I'm doing, and since I subscribed maybe 4 months ago to how I'm using it today, I've seen it improved. And so I'm seeing that, as well as not just even with the iterative improvements, just the ongoing improvements that I'm seeing on a regular basis of using GPT-4. And so yeah, I second that we've seen improvements along the way.
I think that's both a better technological direction. I think that's easier for society to adapt to, but I assume that's where we'll head.
Does that mean that there's not going to be long training cycles and it's continuously retraining or training submodels, Sam, and maybe you could just speak to us about what might change architecturally going forward with respect to large models.
Well, I mean, one thing that you could imagine is this: just that you keep training a model. That would seem like a reasonable thing to me.
Do you think when you talk about releasing it differently this time, are you thinking maybe releasing it to the paid users first, or a slower rollout to get the red teams tight, since now there's so much at stake? You have so many customers actually paying, and you've got everybody watching everything you do. Is it you have to be more thoughtful now,
still only available to the paid users, but one of the things that we really want to do is figure out how to make more advanced technology available to free users too. I think that's a super important part of our mission. And this idea that we build AI tools and make them super widely available, free or not that expensive, whatever it is, so that people can use them to go kind of invent the future, rather than the magic AGI in the sky inventing the future and showering it down upon us. That seems like a much better path. It seems like a more inspiring path. I also think it's where things are actually heading. So it makes me sad that we have not figured out how to make GPT-4 level technology available to free users. It's something we really want to do.
It's just very expensive. I take it.
It's very expensive.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to this, it's very expensive, and sometimes people don't understand that the cost of technology, and it's not just the developers to develop the software in a technology like this. It is all of and you'll hear Sam talk about it later, and you'll hear it if you listen to other interviews, it's the compute needed, is the processing needed to have all of this data to input in your request, your message. It's not just like a Google search and an algorithm. It is having to basically aggregate all of that knowledge and then output so rapidly. It takes a lot of computing power. And so if you think early days of the internet, part of the challenge was people wouldn't want too much traffic, because that would cost them a lot more in their servers. And so even platforms like Facebook wouldn't have video natively into their platform, because that processing power was too expensive for the revenue they were generating. So they had to in some ways slow down innovation because of computing power. And that's where you are with AI, is a lot of it is the expense of the computing power, not just the development cost, but the actual server systems that power this kind of technology. And so making it available for free is just cost prohibitive. Even the $20 a month, I'm confident they're losing money on those subscriptions. They just get more, insight, from those users, and it helps offset some of those costs while they innovate and prepare for the future. But it's not, Amazon lost money for a long, long time, but they kept building that ecosystem. They kept building the processes where they were able to, in time, make money on fractions of pennies. And so they had a long-term plan. And I think ChatGPT, or OpenAI being the parent company, has a great structure and idea. I also want to note, people have often commented on, Sam Altman, 15 years old. He looks so young, and I don't know how old he is, but he's not. This isn't his first rodeo. The guy has had tremendous business success in the past, and I think he really, from my perspective and what I've paid attention to in his background and what he's doing, is he's a really good leader, thoughtful leader, and I think you'll pick that up in this interview. So I'm just impressed with how he has led OpenAI and his perspective, and how they're building their business for the long term, not just for the immediate revenue opportunities.
Chamath, your thoughts?
I think maybe the two big vectors, Sam, that people always talk about is that underlying cost and sort of the latency that's kind of rate limited a killer app. And then I think the second is sort of the long-term ability for people to build in an open source world versus a closed source world. And I think the crazy thing about this space is that the open source community is rabid. So one example that I think is incredible is, we had these guys do a pretty crazy demo for Devin, remember, even 5 or 6 weeks ago, that looked incredible. And then some kid just published it under an open MIT license, like Open Devin, and it's incredibly good, and almost as good as that other thing that was closed source. So maybe we can just start with that, which is, tell me about the business decision to keep these models closed source, and where do you see things going in the next couple of years?
So on the first part of your question, speed and cost, those are hugely important to us. And I don't want to like give a timeline on when we can bring them down a lot because research is hard, but I am confident we'll be able to. We want to like cut the latency super dramatically. We want to cut the cost really, really dramatically. And I believe that will happen. We're still so early in the development of the science and understanding how this works. Plus, we have all the engineering tailwinds. So let
me just pause it.
I don't know like when we.
Just pausing this real quick. I think that what we just heard right there is really important. We are still so early to this science, to this innovation. And I think this is important to remember. This is dial-up internet days of the World Wide Web and the internet that we know today. The internet wasn't always on a phone in our pocket with high-speed data access. It was, many of us remember when we had to plug in a computer with AOL and it would take us, 5 minutes to download just one image. That's where we are in this technology. This is the worst it's ever going to be. Man, we are still early and they're moving really fast.
We get to intelligence too cheap to meter and so fast that it feels instantaneous to us and everything else. But I do believe we can get there for, a pretty high level of intelligence. And it's important to us. It's clearly important to users, and it'll unlock a lot of stuff. On the sort of open source, closed source thing, I think there's great roles for both. I think, we've open sourced some stuff. We'll open source more stuff in the future. But really, like, our mission is to build towards AGI and to figure out how to broadly distribute its benefits. We have a strategy for that. It seems to be resonating with a lot of people. It obviously isn't for everyone, and there's like a big ecosystem, and there will also be open source models and people who build that way. One area that I'm particularly interested personally in open source for is I want an open source model that is as good as it can be that runs on my phone. And that, I think, is gonna, the world doesn't quite have the technology for a good version of that yet, but that seems like a really important thing to go do at some point.
Will you do that? Will you release it?
I don't know if we will or someone will, but someone
What
will.
about Llama 3?
Llama 3 running on a phone?
Well, I guess maybe there's like a 7 billion
The
parameter
Yeah.
version.
Yeah.
I don't know if that will fit on a phone or not, but
That should be fittable on a phone, but I'm not sure if that one's like, I haven't played with it. I don't know if it's like good enough to kind of do the thing I'm thinking about.
So let's talk quickly about open source versus closed source. And there's lots of debates about this in, just the development world. And open source, I think, has been made popular by WordPress being an open source, website, content management system that people could then build these plugins and they could, use it and then resell these themes and the different things of it. Kind of built a base of technology that people could build on top of and then sell things around it. And Meta has really communicated their objective in their AI development has been to build an open source, AI structure for developers to work with. And what that does is that speeds up innovation so that other developers that aren't, based on the core, technology system the OpenAI or whoever's building it can focus on the core system while other developers kind of work on kind of the side aspects of how people can use that system. And so there are benefits and good and bad things of open source versus closed source. And I think what he's saying here is there's going to be opportunities in this space, not just for OpenAI, but it was really started with the idea of being open source. And this is where he and Elon had a lot of falling out, is that it's now moved to being more of a private company and closed source model here.
So when Llama 3 got released, I think the big takeaway for a lot of people was, oh, wow, they've like caught up to GPT-4. I don't think it's equal in all dimensions, but it's like pretty close or pretty in the ballpark. I guess the question is, you guys released 4 a while ago. You're working on 5 or, more upgrades to 4. I mean, I think to Chamath's point about Devin, how do you stay ahead of open source? I mean, that's just like a very hard thing to do in general, right? I mean, how do you think about that?
What we're trying to do is not make the sort of smartest set of weights that we can. What we're trying to make is like this useful intelligence layer for people to use. And a model is part of that. I think we will stay pretty far ahead of, I hope, we'll stay pretty far ahead of the rest of the world on that. But there's a lot of other work around the whole system that's not just that, the model waits, and we'll have to build up enduring value the old-fashioned way, like any other business does. We'll have to figure out a great product and reasons to stick with it, and deliver it at a great price.
When you founded the organization, the stated goal or part of what you discussed was, hey, this is too important for any one company to own it, so therefore it needs to be open. Then there was the switch, hey, it's too dangerous for anybody to be able to see it, and we need to lock this down, because you had some fear about that, I think. Is that accurate? Because the cynical side is like, well, this is a capitalistic move. And then I'm curious what the decision was here in terms of going from open, the world needs to see this, it's really important, to close, only we can see it.
Well,
how did you come to that conclusion? What were the discussions?
Part of the reason that we released ChatGPT was we want the world to see this, and we've been trying to tell people that AI is really important. And if you go back to October of 2022, not that many people thought AI was going to be that important or that it was really happening. And a huge part of what we try to do is put the technology in the hands of people. Now, again, there's different ways to do that. And I think there really is an important role to just say, here's the weights, have at it. But the fact that we have so many people using a free version of ChatGPT that we don't run ads on, we don't try to make money on, we just put out there because we want people to have these tools, I think has done a lot to provide a lot of value and teach people how to fish, but also to get the world really thoughtful about what's happening here. Now, we still don't have all the answers, and we're fumbling our way through this like everybody else, and I assume we'll change strategy many more times as we learn new things.
I just want to pause real quick, and he's saying here that we just want to generously give away GPT 3.5 or this free version to people, and while I think there is a general desire to do that and make it more accessible, I think the reality is, while doing that, they're able to get tremendous insights on how people are using it, and the system becomes smarter the more people use it. And he said earlier too, we're focused on intelligence. And I think people often forget about this with artificial intelligence, that this isn't just, I think when we think about the World Wide Web, it was an aggregate of data and information, where intelligence goes a step further, where it takes that aggregate of knowledge and information that used an algorithm to then help you find that knowledge and integration, to intelligence takes your knowledge and you make decisions based on your knowledge to effectively respond to situations and people and to take actions. And so that's what this is doing, is it's taking knowledge and it's aligning a layer of intelligence on top of that to get smarter. When somebody requests this is how I go and find them and help them, solve this problem and make this decision and do this task on their behalf. And so this is where intelligence becomes this just mind-blowing, innovation. And what happens for all of us as people, intelligent beings, is the more decisions we make, the more things we learn, the more experiences we have, the smarter we get, the more intelligent we become. And that's what they are building this system to do, is to basically take not just our brains to store knowledge, but our decision making, our intelligence processing that we develop as humans over time, and build these systems to be intelligent, similar to how humans are.
When we started OpenAI, we had really no idea about how things were going to go, that we'd make a language model, that we'd ever make a product. We started off I remember very clearly that first day where we're like, well, now we're all here. That was, it's difficult to get this set up, but what happens now? Maybe we should write some papers. Maybe we should stand around a whiteboard. And we've just been trying to put one foot in front of the other and figure out what's next and what's next and what's next. And I think we'll keep doing that.
Can I just replay something and just make sure I heard it right? I think what you were saying on the open source, closed source thing is, if I heard it right, all these models, independent of the business decision you make, are going to become asymptotically accurate towards some amount of accuracy. Not all, but let's just say there's 4 or 5 that are well capitalized enough. You guys, Meta, Google, Microsoft, whomever, right? So let's just say 4 or 5, maybe one startup, and on the open web. And then quickly, the accuracy or the value of these models will probably shift to these proprietary sources of training data that you could get that others can't, or others can get that you can't. Is that how you see this thing evolving, where the open web gets everybody to a certain threshold and then it's just an arms race for data beyond that?
So I definitely don't think it'll be an arms race for data, because when the models get smart enough at some point, it shouldn't be about more data, at least not for training. It may matter data to make it useful. Look, the one thing that I have learned most throughout all of this is that it's hard to make confident statements a couple of years in the future about where this is all going to go. And so don't want to try now. I will say that I expect lots of very capable models in the world. And, like, it feels to me like we just like stumbled on a new fact of nature or science or whatever you want to call it, which is like, you can like, I don't believe this literally, but it's like a spiritual point. Intelligence is just this emergent property of matter, and that's like a rule of physics or something. So people are going to figure that out, but there will be all these different ways to design the systems. People will make different choices, figure out new ideas, and I'm sure, like any other industry, I would expect there to be multiple approaches and different people like different ones. Some people like iPhones, some people like an Android phone. I think there will be some effect like that.
I want to go back to he's continuing to repeat the word intelligence, and that this is not about more data. And I think we can see, and I think it's often being compared to like Google and search engines. And I think we've seen Yahoo and Bing and other search engines, and Google won the race for search engines, and it became better by aggregating as much data and the algorithms it built connected to this data. What this is being built is basically like, we have access to all of the data in the world. The World Wide Web has given us that. Now it's basically how intelligent can these models become? Well, these models become more intelligent by training them, and that's done through development, but it's also done by users using it and giving it feedback. And just like we as humans, we get better through every experience that we have, and the more experiences we have, the more intelligent we become. But our minds sometimes deteriorate or have certain weaknesses, but these technologies don't have that same human limitation. They have higher capacity in so many ways. And so it's often like, if you're going to choose between Gemini or Llama or ChatGPT, you're going to choose the most intelligent one, the one that really is the smartest. And it's like hiring your next executive leader. Which one is the smartest that's going to help you make the best decisions, or is not going to help you, but maybe just make themselves the best decisions? That's the AI model that you want to use. And so that's really what they're developing intelligence, which is, it's a whole new mindset shift that we've got to make as we approach this technology innovation.
Let's go back to that first section of just the cost and the speed. All of you guys are sort of a little bit rate limited on literally NVIDIA's throughput, right? And I think that you and most everybody else have sort of effectively announced how much capacity you can get, just because it's as much as they can spin out. What needs to happen at the substrate so that you can actually compute cheaper, compute faster, get access to more energy? How are you helping to frame out the industry solving those problems?
Well, we'll make huge algorithmic gains for sure, and I don't want to discount that. I'm very interested in chips and energy, but if we can make a same quality model twice as efficient, that's like we had twice as much compute.
Right.
And I think there's a gigantic amount of work to be done there, and I hope we'll start really seeing those results. Other than that, the whole supply chain is like very complicated. There's logic fab capacity, there's how much HBM the world can make, there's how quickly you can like get permits and pour the concrete, make the data centers, and then have people in there wiring them all up. There's finally energy, which is a huge bottleneck. But I think when there's this much value to people, the world will do its thing. We'll try to help it happen faster. And there's probably like, I don't know how to give it a number, but there's like some percentage chance where there is, as you were saying, like a huge substrate breakthrough, and we have like a massively more efficient way to do computing. But I don't like bank on that or spend too much time thinking about it.
What about the device side and sort of, you mentioned sort of the models that can fit on a phone. So obviously, whether that's an LLM or some SLM or something, I'm sure you're thinking about that. But then does the device itself change? I mean, does it need to be as expensive as an iPhone?
I'm super interested in this. I love like great new form factors of computing. And it feels like with every major technological advance, a new thing becomes possible. Phones are unbelievably good. So I think the threshold is like very high here. Like what, like I think like I personally think an iPhone is like the greatest piece of technology humanity has ever made. It's really a wonderful product.
What comes after it? Like
I don't know. I mean, that was what I was saying. It's so good that to get beyond it, I think the bar is like quite high.
Well, you've been working with Johnny Ive on something, right?
I want to just pause here real quickly. Is they're talking about, basically hardware now, and one, the hardware needed with servers and things like that I mentioned earlier. But now they're talking about basically the iPhone being such a great product, and people are often like, what's the next thing? Is it VR? Is it AR? Is it, mixed reality? Is it like Google Glasses, things like that? And he's like, I don't know. So this is a guy that lives in this world, and he knows what's limiting his essentially software to be accessible to everyone. And him saying the iPhone is the greatest invention ever made, or basically a hardware device ever created. And I think that's pretty significant to understand. And I think how important that mobile technology is going to continue to be into the future. And so he really is kind of like, look, this is the basically the primary hardware platform that we believe we need to be integrating with for this technology to get the best adoption and use. And so I think this just speaks to our mobile world is going to probably stay mobile for a distant future. And so as disruptive as the phone was, there's not going to be anytime soon likely another phone that is going to be so significant to disruption from a hardware perspective.
Been discussing ideas, but I don't like, if I knew.
Is it that it has to be more complicated, or actually just much, much cheaper and simpler?
Well, almost everyone's willing to pay for a phone anyway. So if you could like make a way cheaper device, I think the barrier to carry a second thing or use a second thing is pretty high. So I don't think, given that we're all willing to pay for phones, or most of us are, I don't think cheaper is the answer.
Different is the answer then?
Would there be like a specialized chip that would run on the phone that was really good at powering the phone size AI model?
Probably, but the phone manufacturers are going to do that for sure. That doesn't necessitate a new device. I think you'd have to like find some really different interaction paradigm that the technology enables. And if I knew what it was, I would be excited to be working on it right now. But
you have voice working right now in the app. In fact, I set my action button on my phone to go directly to ChatGPT's voice app, and I use it with my kids, and they love it. Talking to it. It's got latency issues, but it's really great.
We'll get that better. And I think voice is a hint to whatever the next thing is. Like if you can get voice interaction to be really good, I think that feels like a different way to use a computer.
Okay, this was a big, and I think he's really teasing ChatGPT in this statement as voice is a hint. And I think we have seen this development through the years with Alexa, and as Alexa is integrated into our homes more and into our mobile devices and become a very valuable tool to use our voice to get information off of the internet. But now voice is expanding to another level to actually be intelligent. And so we are now having or can have a conversation with a form of intelligence, and not just a voice triggered action item driven by an algorithm. And so this is, I think, a big significant development of where this is going. Is we've seen it as a chat box on a screen to now a conversation that we can have in our headphones or with our home speakers and things like that. So I think this is a pretty significant kind of leak that he's hinting at here or kind of teasing out here.
But again,
What's the
like we
blocker
already
with that, by the way? Like, why is it not responsive? And it feels like a CB, like over. It's really annoying to use, in that way. But it's also brilliant when it gives you the right answer.
We are working on that. It's so clunky right now. It's slow. It's like kind of doesn't feel very smooth or authentic or organic. Like we'll get all that to be much better.
What about computer vision? I mean, they have glasses, or maybe you could wear a pendant. I mean, you take the combination of visual or video data, combine it with voice, and now the AI knows everything that's happening around you.
Super powerful to be able to like the multimodality of saying like, hey, ChatGPT, what am I looking at? Or like, what kind of plant is this? I can't quite tell. That's obvious. That's another, I think, like hint, but whether people want to wear glasses or like hold up something when they want that, like there's a bunch of just like the sort of like societal interpersonal issues here are all very complicated about wearing a computer on your face.
We saw that with Google Glass. People got punched in the face in the mission. Started a lot of fights.
Forgot about that. So I think it's like,
what are the apps that could be unlocked if AI was sort of ubiquitous on people's phones? Do you have a sense of that, or what would you want to see built?
I think what I want is just this always on, like super low friction thing where I can either by voice or by text or ideally like some other, it just kind of knows what I want, have this like constant thing helping me throughout my day that's got like as much context on as possible. It's like the world's greatest assistant. And it's just this like thing working to make me better and better. There's like a, and when you hear people like talk about the AI future, they imagine there's sort of two different approaches, and they don't sound that different, but I think they're like very different for how we'll design the system in practice. There's I want an extension of myself. I want like a ghost or an alter ego or this thing that really like is me, is acting on my behalf, is responding to emails, not even telling me about it, is sort of like, it becomes more me and is me. And then there's this other thing, which is like, I want a great senior employee. It may get to know me very well. I may delegate it. You can like have access to my email and I'll tell you the constraints, but I think of it as this like separate entity. And I personally like the separate entity approach better. The thing is not you, but it's like a always available, always great, super capable assistant executive.
Okay, now I think we're getting into where AI is replacing jobs. And I think he's saying basically it can be that assistant that is taking notes in your meeting, and we're seeing AI apps like that. Or it can be that assistant that, like you're like, hey, what is that I'm looking at? And it can tell you what that is. Or, even when you look in the refrigerator that your milk is getting low, so I'm going to just automatically order that for you. And it's just always there to help you throughout your day, whether that's work related, personal related, calendar related, email related. It's assisting you in those kind of just tasks that we just have to get done. But then he's also saying it can also be like a senior level, executive too, that can help you make better decisions and analyze and see things on the horizon. And I think this is a unique challenge with humanity is we have seen new technologies, through the years and in agriculture and other things that have replaced human labor jobs. But I think this is replacing a lot of both, hourly employee type of work and, salary executive type of work and decision making that might require fewer executives in an organization, because AI now has a seat at the table to help you make better decisions. You might not need that consultant, or you might not need those other senior level executives, because AI is using its intelligence to help you. So it's this pretty big conversation of what's to come. And you can see where, man, that's really beneficial from an efficiency standpoint, but man, that gets really complicated from a societal
It's an agent in a way, like it's out there working on your behalf and understands what you want and anticipates what you want, is what I'm reading into what you're saying.
I think there'd be agent-like behavior, but there's like a difference between a senior employee and an agent.
Yeah.
And like, I want it, if I think of like one of the things that I like about a senior employee is they'll push back on me. They will sometimes not do something I ask, or there sometimes will say like, I can do that thing if you want, but if I do it, here's what I think would happen, and then this and then that, and are you really sure? And I definitely want that kind of vibe, which not just like this thing that I give a task and it blindly does.
It can reason.
Yeah, and push back.
It can reason. It has like the kind of relationship with me that I would expect out of a really competent person that I worked with, which is different from like a sycophant.
Yeah.
I think this is an important note here of we are going to have a form of relationship with AI or with, AI systems that is complicated. And I think we're seeing even the societal impact of that already, where people are in many ways having like a romantic relationship with these AI bots. And it's kind of sick and twisted in a lot of ways. But it becomes, and it's interesting because, my kids might tell you that Alexa is a part of our household, but it's not like we have an actual relationship. But this AI that we're really talking about here is going to learn us. It's going to understand how we need to be communicated with and how we like to be communicated with, and it will adapt to us, and we will have, a relationship. It's different than human relationship, but I think sometimes it's going to be complicated of, do we end up liking AI better than we like other people? Like this AI is going to do whatever we ask it to do, but it's also saying it's going to push back on you too, maybe, if you want it to. And so this is a really interesting dynamic as we start thinking about intelligence and the interactions that we're going to have with this technology in the future. And so, yeah, it's very heady when you start going down those paths in your mind, and obviously they're putting a lot of thought and insights into how they're developing it around those things.
The thing in that world where if you have this like Jarvis-like thing that can reason, what do you think it does to products that you use today where the interface is very valuable? So for example, if you look at an Instacart, or if you look at an Uber, or if you look at a DoorDash, these are not services that are meant to be pipes that are just providing a set of APIs to a smart set of agents that ubiquitously work on behalf of 8 billion people. What do you think has to change in how we think about how apps need to work, of how this entire infrastructure of experiences need to work in a world where you're agentically interfacing to the world?
I'm actually very interested in designing a world that is equally usable by humans and by AIs. So I like the interpretability of that. I like the smoothness of the handoffs. I like the ability that we can provide feedback or whatever. So, DoorDash could just expose some API to my future AI assistant, and they could go put the order in or whatever. Or I could say, like, I could be holding my phone and I could say, okay, AI assistant, like, you put in this order on DoorDash, please. And I could like watch the app open and see the thing clicking around, and I could say, hey, no, not this, or like, there's something about designing a world that is usable equally well by humans and AIs that I think is an interesting concept.
And
same reason I'm like more excited about humanoid robots than sort of robots of like very other shapes. The world is very much designed for humans, and I think we should absolutely keep it that way. And a shared interface is nice.
So you see voice chat, that modality kind of gets rid of apps. You just ask it for sushi. It knows sushi you liked before. It knows what you don't like and does its best shot at doing it.
It's hard for me to imagine that we just go to a world totally where you say like, hey, ChatGPT, order me sushi. And it says, okay, do you want it from this restaurant? What kind, what time, whatever. I think visual user interfaces are super good for a lot of things. And it's hard for me to imagine like a world where you never look at a screen and just use voice mode only, but I can imagine that for a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, Apple tried with Siri. Like, supposedly you can order an Uber automatically with Siri. I don't think anybody's ever done it because why would you take the risk of not?
Well, the quality, to your point, the quality is not good. But when the quality is good enough, you'll actually prefer it just because it's just lighter weight. You don't have to take your phone out. You don't have to search for your app and press it. And it automatically logged you out. Oh, hold on, log back in. Oh, TFA. It's a whole pain in the ass.
It's like setting a timer with Siri. I do every time because it works really well and it's great. And I don't need more information.
Exactly.
But ordering an Uber, like, I want to see the prices for a few different options. I want to see how far away it is. I want to see, like, maybe even where they are on the map because I might walk somewhere. I get a lot more information I think in less time by looking at that order the Uber screen than I would if I had to do that all through the audio channel.
I like your idea of watching it happen. That's kind of cool.
I think there will just be like, there are different interfaces we use for different tasks, and I think that'll keep going.
Of all the developers that are building apps and experiences on OpenAI, are there a few that stand out for you where you're like, okay, this is directionally going in a super interesting area, even if it's like a toy app? But are there things that you guys point to and say, this is really important?
I met with a new company this morning, or barely even a company. It's like two people that are going to work on a summer project, trying to actually finally make the AI tutor. And I've always been interested in this space. A lot of people have done great stuff on our platform, but if someone can deliver like the way that you actually like, they used a phrase I love, which is this is going to be like a Montessori level reinvention for how people learn things.
Yeah.
But if you can like find this new way to like let people explore and learn in new ways on their own, I'm personally super excited about that.
I just want to add to this, even as a parent and a learner, that this is a really powerful opportunity, is the educational opportunity where you could say, ChatGPT, teach me how to play the violin. And then it is like our coach along the way, and it's learning, like, nope, change that or do this. And it's a personalized tutor that knows where we are, can respond to that. And I think about how we've done that to date. A lot of times we'll just either buy a course online, or we'll, go to YouTube and like, teach me how to do this, or, somebody's training. And now ChatGPT can actually be a teacher that is creating a personalized teaching experience for you. Now, I'm really intrigued of what does this look like in the actual education space for kids growing up, but I think even as adults, anything we want to learn how to do, allowing the AI systems to be educational for us as humans is a really fascinating use of this technology. I love that he's focused on that.
A lot of the coding related stuff you mentioned, Devin, earlier, I think that's like a super cool vision of the future. The thing that healthcare, I believe should be pretty transformed by this. But the thing I'm personally most
I just want to pause there. So we said coding and healthcare. I'm very intrigued by both of these. I've worked kind of in both of these spaces. Coding, one of the things they've often said is, as these things come along, we're going to just teach people how to code. I think coding is actually going to become one of the least useful, things to know in the future, because AI will code better than humans code. And that will be one of the first tasks. I think that AI, or is already one of the first tasks that is being replaced by AI. And so while coding infrastructure, software engineering is still going to be critically important in what direction we take it, but the actual writing of code can be done so well by AI. And then the healthcare side of, if you think about just even some of the scans and the way AI could read scans, could read our blood, and we run things through computers already, but it's going to go to another level of just learning and understanding health and wellness, and basically being able to better give us the insights of each of us individually, of what our bodies are needing and where our deficiencies are. And we've seen this even with like the Apple Watch and some of the features that are available through new technologies, but AI is going to be a big part of that. And it's very exciting. And I'm really intrigued to see, even with cancer research, where AI plays into that. So huge opportunities there.
Excited about is the sort of doing faster and better scientific discovery. GPT-4 clearly not there in a big way, although maybe it accelerates things a little bit by making scientists more productive.
But AlphaFold 3, yeah.
That's like...
But Sam...
That will be a triumph.
Those are not like these models are trained and built differently than the language models. I mean, to some, obviously there's a lot that's similar, but there's a lot, there's kind of a ground up architecture to a lot of these models that are being applied to these specific problem sets, these specific applications, like chemistry interaction modeling, for example.
You'll need some of that for sure, but the thing that I think we're missing across the board for many of these things we've been talking about is models that can do reasoning. And once you have reasoning, you can connect it to chemistry simulators or whatever
I guess
else.
That's the important question I wanted to kind of talk about today, was this idea of networks of models. People talk a lot about agents as if there's kind of this linear set of call functions that happen. But one of the things that arises in biology is networks of systems that have cross interactions, that the aggregation of the system, the aggregation of the network produces an output rather than one thing calling another, that thing calling another. Do we see like an emergence in this architecture of either specialized models or network models that work together to address bigger problem sets, use reasoning? There's computational models that do things like chemistry or arithmetic, and there's other models that do, rather than one model to rule them all that's purely generalized.
I don't know. I don't know how much reasoning is going to turn out to be a super generalizable thing. I suspect it will, but that's more just like an intuition and a hope, and it would be nice if it worked out that way. I don't know if that's like...
But let's walk through the protein modeling example. There's a bunch of training data, images of proteins, and then sequence data, and they build a model, predictive model, and they have a set of processes and steps for doing that. Do you envision that there's this artificial general intelligence or this great reasoning model that then figures out how to build that submodel, that figures out how to solve that problem by acquiring the necessary data and then resolving it to a
There's so
solution?
many ways where that could go. Like maybe it trains a literal model for it, or maybe it just like knows the one big model, what it can like go pick what other training data it needs and ask a question and then update on that.
I guess the real question is, are all these startups going to die? Because so many startups are...
I just want to jump in here. As we think about where this technology is going, you can hear, these wheels spinning among these different leaders. And I think this is like early days of the internet, is we didn't even know about a phone that was going to come, or we couldn't have predicted high-speed internet, and that our televisions would now be all connected to the internet, and all the TV we'd watch would be on the internet, and we'd have a mobile device that we use for our camera, and we watch videos on, and we use to Uber a car or deliver food or pay our bills and deposit checks and all the things that our phones do today with the internet. And so it's kind of this innovation of hardware and software that has made our lives better in a lot of ways and more accessible. And simultaneously, I think we can agree that there's been aspects of the addictiveness of social media and just screen use that has been problematic to society. And so we're in this day of like, we can see what's developing and beginning to connect dots of, now we can do this, or now we can unlock this, and so it simultaneously, there's some complexities we have to be thinking about, but there's also just all of these potential new opportunities. And I think this is where there's such a unique opportunity for leaders, is when you have to understand what this is and functionally how it works, but then when you can begin to connect those dots to your mission and what you're doing. And I think the other side of it is, we also have to, part of our reaction can be, well, this is going to cost people, like, what are they going to do anymore? What are they going to do? Or, and the reality is every entity, even pre-internet, there's ways that we communicated. We sent out direct mail, we did manual phone calls, and then we used email, and then we, moved to text messaging. And so we have different ways that we do things, and we are going to adapting to this innovation is going to be such an important issue for us as leaders to adapt within our organizations. But I think we need to not just think about how we're going to react to some of the adjustments that are going to be needed made, but how are we going to need to lean into the opportunities that are now going to be created? I think that's where we can really get into some exciting potential with this. And so, yeah, I think I hope your wheels are spinning like theirs are around some just ideas of when we really think about this innovation of intelligence being created and how that can be utilized within our organization.
Working in that modality, which is go get special data and then train a new model on that special data from the ground up. And then it only does that one sort of thing, and it works really well at that one thing, and it works better than anything else at that one.
There's like a version of this I think you can like already see. When you were talking about like biology and these complicated networks of systems, the reason I was smiling, I got super sick recently, and I'm mostly better now, but it was just like body like got beat up like one system at a time, fought, like you can really tell like, okay, it's this cascading thing. And that reminded me of you like talking about the like biology is just these like, you have no idea how much these systems interact with each other until things start going wrong. And that was sort of like interesting to see. But I was using chatgpt to try to like figure out like what was happening, whatever, and would say, well, I'm unsure of this one thing, and then I just like posted a paper on it without even reading the paper, like in the context, and it says, oh, that was the thing I was unsure of, like now I think this instead. So there's like that was like a small version of what you're talking about, where you can say this, I don't know this thing, and you can put more information. You don't retrain the model, you're just adding it to the context here, and now you're getting a.
So these models that are predicting protein structure, like let's say, right, this is the whole basis, and now other molecules at AlphaFold 3, is it basically a world where the best generalized model goes in and gets that training data and then figures out on its own? And maybe you could use an example for us. Can you tell us about Sora, your video model that generates amazing moving images, moving video, and what's different about the architecture there, whatever you're willing to share on how that is different?
Yeah, so on the general thing first, you clearly will need specialized simulators, connectors, pieces of data, whatever. But my intuition, and again, I don't have this like backed up with science, my intuition would be if we can figure out the core of generalized reasoning, connecting that to new problem domains in the same way that humans are generalized reasoners, would I think be doable.
It's like a faster unlock than
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Sora like does not start with a language model. That's a model that is like customized to do video, and so like we're clearly not at that world yet.
Right. So just as an example, for you guys to build a good video model, you built it from scratch using, I'm assuming, some different architecture and different data. But in the future, the generalized reasoning system, the AGI, whatever system, theoretically could render that by figuring out how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, one example of this is like, okay, as far as I know, all the best text models in the world are still autoregressive models, and the best image and video models are diffusion models. And that's like sort of strange in some sense.
Yeah.
So there's a
Sanjay wanted to speak to this real quick, and what he's kind of saying is when you get to AGIs, artificial general intelligence is the word that's used here a lot. And this is what scares a lot of people, is basically this is when it becomes smarter than humans. And when you get there, essentially, if the intelligence doesn't yet know how to do something, it basically goes and says, then I'm going to tell myself to go and learn how to do that. And so you almost teach it how to learn. And then when it learns how to learn that, and so this is how it just keeps learning, is it, in many ways, it learns how to learn, and just mind blowing how this will work. And honestly, just how smart these intelligence models can and will become. And I think this is where, for many people, it gets scary to think about, but yeah, pretty heavy, heady stuff to think about.
The big debate about training data. You guys have been, I think, the most thoughtful of any company. You've got licensing deals now, FT, etc. And we got to just be gentle here because you're involved in a New York Times lawsuit. You weren't able to settle, I guess, an arrangement with them for training data. How do you think about fairness in fair use? We've had big debates here on the pod. Obviously, your actions are, speak volumes that you're trying to be fair by doing licensing deals. So what's your personal position on the rights of artists who create beautiful music, lyrics, books, and you taking that and then making a derivative product out of it and then monetizing it? And what's fair here? And how do we get to a world where, artists can make content in the world and then decide what they want other people to do with it? Yeah, and I'm just curious your personal belief, because I know you to be a thoughtful person on this, and I know a lot of other people in our industry are not very thoughtful about how they think about content creators.
So I think it's very different for different kinds of, look, on fair use, I think we have a very reasonable position under the current law, but I think AI is so different that for things like art, we'll need to think about them in different ways. But let's say if you go read a bunch of math on the internet and learn how to do math, that I think seems unobjectionable to most people. And then there's another set of people who might have a different opinion. Well, what if you actually, let me not get into that, just in the interest of not making this answer too long. So I think there's one category of people are okay, there's generalized human knowledge. You can kind of go, if you learn that, that's open domain or something. If you kind of go learn about the Pythagorean theorem. That's one end of the spectrum. And then I think the other extreme end of the spectrum is art. And maybe even more specifically, I would say it's a system generating art in the style or the likeness of another artist, would be kind of the furthest end of that. And then there's many, many cases on the spectrum in between. I think the conversation has been historically very caught up on training data, but it will increasingly become more about what happens at inference time. As training data becomes less valuable and what the system does accessing, information in context in real time, or taking something like that, what happens at inference time will become more debated, and how what the new economic model is there. So if you say song in the style of Taylor Swift, even if the model were never trained on any Taylor Swift songs at all, you can still have a problem, which is that it may have read about Taylor Swift, it may know about her themes, Taylor Swift means something. And then the question is should that model, even if it were never trained on any Taylor Swift song whatsoever, be allowed to do that? And if so, how should Taylor get paid?
Right.
So I think
this is so interesting and a big debate, and I don't live in this world so much, but I think about, as you think about this being intelligence, that there is this complexity of, practically any artist that is creating something has been inspired by other artists to develop their art. And essentially what these intelligence models that are already creating art, they can create graphics, or if you ask ChatGPT to write you a poem about red roses, it will write you a poem about red roses, and it's pretty good. And that was created based on just inspiration from other poems that historically been created, and the intelligence these systems have gained from things like that. And so it really is complicated as we think about what the future of art and even films will be. You could have it in the future, just say, hey, create a cartoon about this and this, and these AI systems will be able to generate this art for you. And I think this is going to be a big question into the future. Of, I think some of the questions are what should, and what, from a consumption standpoint, do we want to consume things that were created by AI, or do we really want to guard, art in certain ways, or different mediums So yeah, it's really, really fascinating to begin to think
I think
about.
there's an opt-in, opt-out in that case, first of all, and then there's an economic model. Staying on the music example, there is something interesting to look at from the historical perspective here, which is sampling and how the economics around that work. This is not quite the same thing, but it's like an interesting place to start looking.
Sam, let me just challenge that. What's the difference in the example you're giving of the model learning about things like song structure, tempo, melody, harmony relationships, discovering all the underlying structure that makes music successful, and then building new music using training data, and what a human does that listens to lots of music, learns about, and their brain is processing and building all those same sort of predictive models or those same sort of discoveries or understandings. What's the difference here, and why are you making the case that perhaps artists should be uniquely paid? This is not a sampling situation. The AI is not outputting and it's not storing in the model the actual original song. It's learning structure, right? So,
I wasn't trying to make that point, because I agree, like in the same way that humans are inspired by other humans. I was saying if you say generate me a song in the style of Taylor Swift.
I see, right? Okay,
Yeah, I think that's
where the prompt leverages some artist.
I think personally that's a different case.
Would you be comfortable asking, or would you be comfortable letting the model train itself, a music model being trained on the whole corpus of music that humans have created, without royalties being paid to the artists that that music is being fed in? And then you're not allowed to ask, artist-specific prompts. You could just say, hey, play me a really cool pop song that's fairly modern about heartbreak, with a female voice.
We have currently made the decision not to do music, and partly because exactly these questions of where you draw the lines and even I was meeting with several musicians I really admire recently, and I was just trying to talk about some of these edge cases, but even the world in which, if we went and let's say we paid 10,000 musicians to create a bunch of music just to make a great training set where the music model could learn everything about song structure and what makes a good catchy beat and everything else, and only trained on that, let's say we could still make a great music model, which maybe we could. I was kind of posing that as a thought experiment to musicians, and they're like, well, I can't object to that on any principle basis at that point. And yet there's still something I don't like about it. Now, that's not a reason not to do it necessarily, but it is. Did you see that ad that Apple put out, maybe it was yesterday or something, of squishing all of human creativity down into one really thin iPad?
What was your take on it? People got really emotional about it. Yeah. It's stronger reaction than you would think. Yeah.
There's something about, I'm obviously hugely positive on AI, but there is something that I think is beautiful about human creativity and human artistic expression. And, for an AI that just does better science, great, bring that on. But an AI that is going to do this deeply beautiful human creative expression, I think we should figure out, it's going to happen. It's going to be a tool.
I love, and you can hear his wrestle. This is one of the things I love is it's not we just need to get over ourselves and, AI is going to just, we need to embrace all the great things it does. And he's really sharing this very real wrestle with humanity and how humanity will be affected by this technology, and how important this aspect of humanity is, that maybe this really does diminish our humanity if we prioritize this aspect of innovation with AI. And so I love that he's at least articulating this tension, because he kind of said it's going to happen whether we like it or not, but there's also something maybe we should be intentional to guard this aspect of humanity
that will lead us to greater creative heights. But I think we should figure out how to do it in a way that preserves the spirit of what we all care about here.
And I think your actions speak loudly. We were trying to do Star Wars characters in DALL-E. And if you ask for Darth Vader, it says, hey, we can't do that. So you've, I guess, red teamed or whatever you call it internally.
We try.
You're not allowing people to use other people's IP. So you've taken that decision. Now, if you asked it to make a Jedi Bulldog or a Sith Lord Bulldog, which I did, it made my bulldogs as Sith bulldogs. So
there's an interesting
it's
question
really about your
like
spectrum,
where,
right?
Yeah. You know, we put out this thing yesterday called the spec, where we're trying to say, here's how our model is supposed to behave. And it's very hard. It's a long document. It's very hard to like specify exactly in each case where the limits should be. And I view this as like a discussion that's going to need a lot more input. But these sorts of questions about, okay, maybe it shouldn't generate Darth Vader, but the idea of a Sith Lord or a Sith style thing or Jedi at this point is like part of the culture. Or like these are all hard decisions.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The music industry is going to consider this opportunity to make Taylor Swift songs their opportunity. It's part of the 4-part fair use test is, you know, these who gets to capitalize on new innovations for existing art. And Disney has an argument that, hey, you know, if you're going to make Sora versions of Ashoka or whatever, Obi-Wan Kenobi, that's Disney's opportunity. And that's a great partnership for you, you know, to pursue.
So I think this section I would label as AI and the law. So let me ask maybe a higher level question. What does it mean when people say regulate AI?
Totally.
Sam, what does that even mean?
And comment on California's new proposed regulations as well if you're up for it.
I'm concerned. I mean, there's so many proposed regulations, but most of the ones I've seen on the California state things I'm concerned about. I also have a general fear of the states all doing this themselves. When people say regulate AI, I don't think they mean one thing. I think there's like some people are like ban the whole thing. Some people are like don't allow it to be open source, require it to be open source. The thing that I am personally most interested in is I think there will come. Look, I may be wrong about this. I will acknowledge that this is a forward-looking statement and those are always dangerous to make. But I think there will come a time in the not super distant future, like, you know, we're not talking like decades and decades from now, where the frontier AI systems are capable of causing significant global harm. And for those kinds of systems, in the same way we have like global oversight of nuclear weapons or synthetic bio or things that can really like have a very negative impact way beyond the realm of one country, I would like to see some sort of international agency that is looking at the most powerful systems and ensuring like reasonable safety testing. You know, these things are not going to escape and recursively self-improve or whatever.
I just want to speak to, even the way he talked about art and the way he's talking about this is that he's and other things, he's been proactive in just saying this space needs regulation. We need, you know, some boundaries to work within. And I think we have seen this with big tech, that in many ways they've moved faster than government regulation can keep up with. And I think this is another, you know, situation here where the government doesn't know what it is even to make regulation around it. And so I don't know, you know, the answer here. I think what gives me peace in this is everything I hear and see and experience with Sam Altman and some of these other leaders is I think their intentions are good. And how do we prevent this from being used, you know, in negative ways and in dangerous ways, because there will be opportunities to do that. And I think if we can get ahead of what those ways might be and how to regulate it, we can actually create, you know, greater safety boundaries for these companies and for these innovators, and, you know, even for the government and how the government uses AI. And so I think this is a really important conversation, and I think it's not a real easy conversation, but I think his concerns are valid. Is some of the regulations people are talking about are all over the place, and I think they come in many ways from a lot of ignorance too, that's going to limit innovation, in some ways create even more reactive behavior when we get behind, as you know, with this technology. So it's an interesting topic that doesn't have a good solution, but anything that has been proposed to date definitely does not seem like the optimal solution. That's for sure.
The criticism of this is that you have the resources to cozy up, to lobby, to be involved, and you've been very involved with politicians, and then startups, which you're also passionate about and invest in, are not going to have the ability to resource and deal with this, and that this regulatory capture, as per our friend Bill Gurley did a great talk last year about it. So maybe you could address that head on. Do you feel like
if the line were we're only going to look at models that are trained on computers that cost more than 10 billion or more than 100 billion or whatever dollars, I'd be fine with that. There'd be some line that'd be fine. And I don't think that puts any regulatory burden on startups.
So if you have like the nuclear raw material to make a nuclear bomb, like there's a small subset of people who have that, therefore you use the analogy of like a nuclear inspector kind of situation.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. Sachs, you have a question?
Well, Chamath, go ahead. You have a follow-up.
Can I say one more thing about that?
Of course.
I'd be super nervous about regulatory overreach here. I think we can get this wrong by doing way too much, or even a little too much. I think we can get this wrong by doing not enough. But I do think part of, and now, I mean, we have seen regulatory overstepping or capture just get super bad in other areas. And like also maybe nothing will happen, but I think it is part of our duty and our mission to like talk about what we believe is likely to happen and what it takes to get that right.
The challenge, Sam, is that we have statute that is meant to protect people, protect society at large. What we're creating, however, is statute that gives the government rights to go in and audit code, to audit business trade secrets. We've never seen that to this degree before. Basically, the California legislation that's proposed and some of the federal legislation that's been proposed basically requires the government to audit a model, to audit software, to audit and review the parameters and the weightings of the model. And then you need their check mark in order to deploy it for commercial or public use. And for me, it just feels like we're trying to rein in the government agencies for fear, and because folks have a hard time understanding this and are scared about the implications of it, they want to control it. And because they want, and the only way to control it is to say, give me a right to audit before you can release it.
Yeah,
as
and
opposed
they're
to
clueless. These people
and
are
they're clueless. I mean, the way that the stuff is written, you read it, you're like going to pull your hair out because, as you know better than anyone, in 12 months, none of this stuff's going to make sense anyway.
Totally.
Right.
Look, the reason I have pushed for an agency-based approach for kind of like the big picture stuff and not a like write it in law is in 12 months, it will all be written wrong. And I don't think, even if these people were like true world experts, I don't think they could get it right looking out 12 or 24 months. And these policies, which is like, we're going to look at, we're going to audit all of your source code and like look at all of your weights one by one. Like, I think there's a lot of crazy proposals out there.
By the way, especially if the models are always being retrained all the time, if they become more dynamic.
Again, this is why I think it's, But like before an airplane gets certified, there's like a set of safety tests. We put the airplane through it. And
totally,
it's different than reading all of your code.
That's reviewing the output of the model, not reviewing the insides of the model.
And so what I was going to say is that is the kind of thing that I think as safety testing makes sense.
How are we going to get that to happen, Sam? And I'm not just speaking for OpenAI, I speak for the industry, for humanity, because I am concerned that we draw ourselves into almost like a dark ages type of era by restricting the growth of these incredible technologies that can prosper, that humanity can prosper from so significantly. How do we change the sentiment and get that to happen? Because this is all moving so quickly at the government levels, and folks seem to be getting it wrong. And I'm personally concerned.
Just to build, Sam, the architectural decision, for example, that Llama took is pretty interesting in that it's like, we're going to let Llama grow and be as unfettered as possible. And we have this other kind of thing that we call Llama Guard that's meant to be these protective guardrails. Is that how you see the problem being solved correctly? Or do you see that
at the current strength of models, definitely some things are going to go wrong. And I don't want to like make light of those or not take those seriously, but I don't have any like catastrophic risk worries with a GPT-4 level model. And I think there's many safe ways to choose to deploy this. Maybe we'd find more common ground if we said that, and I think like, the specific example of models that are capable, that are technically capable, not even if they're not going to be used this way, of recursive self-improvement or of, autonomously designing and deploying a bioweapon or something like that.
Or a new model.
That was the recursive self-improvement point. We should have safety testing on the outputs at an international level for models that, have a reasonable chance of posing a threat there. I don't think like GPT-4, of course, does not pose in any sort of, well, I don't want to say any sort because we don't, I don't think that GPT-4 poses a material threat on those kinds of things.
I just want to add real quick on this point is that I think this is really smart, is let's create some universal just safety testing procedures before any model is released to the public. Now this, obviously, we've got to have efficiency in those processes so they don't just get stalled. But just like before you release, medicine or any other things before they're released to the public, they've got to go through testing. And I think that this is a thoughtful way to make sure that there's room for constant innovation, but there's also, effective safety testing and, maybe, stamps of approval that get put on certain models that become, before they become more publicly available.
And I think there's many safe ways to release a model like this. But, when like significant loss of human life is a serious possibility, like airplanes or any number of other examples where I think we're happy to have some sort of testing framework. Like I don't think about an airplane when I get on it. I just assume it's going to be safe.
Right.
There's a lot of hand wringing right now, Sam, about jobs. And you had I think you did like some sort of a test when you were at YC about UBI, and you've been
Our results on that come out very soon. It was a 5-year study that wrapped up or started 5 years ago. Well, there was like a beta study first, and there was like a long one that ran. But
ballpark, what did you learn
explain
about that?
Why'd you start it? Maybe just explain UBI and why you started it.
So we started thinking about this in 2016, kind of about the same time, started taking AI really seriously. And the theory was that the magnitude of the change that may come to society and jobs in the economy and sort of in some deeper sense than that, like what the social contract looks like, meant that we should have many studies to study many ideas about new ways to arrange that. I also think that, I'm not like a super fan of how the government has handled most policies designed to help poor people. And I kind of believe that if you could just give people money, they would make good decisions, the market would do its thing. And, I'm very much in favor of lifting up the floor and eliminating poverty. But I'm interested in better ways to do that than what we have tried for the existing social safety net and kind of the way things have been handled. And I think giving people money is not going to go solve all problems. It's certainly not going to make people happy, but it might solve some problems, and it might give people a better horizon with which to help themselves. And I'm interested in that. I think that now that we see some of the ways, so 2016 was a very long time ago. Now that we see some of the ways that AI is developing, I wonder if there's better things to do than the traditional conceptualization of UBI. I wonder if the future looks something like more like universal basic compute than universal basic income, and everybody gets like a slice of GPT-7's compute, and they can use it, they can resell it, they can donate it to somebody to use for cancer research. But what you get is not dollars, but this like
productivity
slice. Yeah, you own like part of the productivity.
Right.
I would like to shift to the gossip.
So I think this is one of the most interesting aspects of this conversation, where he's getting into universal basic income and the societal effects of, and he talked about something that before they even started developing a chatgpt, they started thinking about what could be the societal effects of this technology, and maybe we need to do some research around universal basic income, or he proposes their universal basic compute that seeing UBI is already hard, I think to comprehend just giving away money and how that will affect things. But universal-based compute complicates that even more. But really interesting that you can tell even from the beginning of OpenAI, they've been thinking about how big this is and how significant this will affect the future. And I love that they approached it from that standpoint instead of just developing something and being like, oh no, now what do we do? And I think that's kind of what happened with Facebook, is it just got so big and they're like, we're going to connect the world. But no, now that, this is affecting people and it's addictive, and we, now I don't know what to do now. And obviously there's been some, progress made and priorities, adjusted, but so often innovation happens and then we react to the fallout of it. And they're thinking ahead of that, even from the beginning of building out the technology. So I just want to wrap up this video, this conversation, and I ended, you can go listen to the rest of the conversation. They kind of get into the drama of what happened at Microsoft and with OpenAI and him getting fired. And I think that's an interesting story, but I think at the end of the day, I think what we can hear, but what we can pay attention to is that this is very significant. OpenAI has been very thoughtful in what they're building, and that this is just the beginning. And so I'm really, I think the more I listen to Sam Altman, the more I'm impressed with him as a leader, the more my mind begins to think about what's coming. And practically what I'm seeing is ChatGPT is incredibly efficient and effective for me today, but what it's going to be a year from now is going to be way better than what it is today. Honestly, what it is since this interview came out, and with GPT 4.0, it has gotten even better. And so I'm really excited about where it's going. I'm really excited about the opportunities. I want to continue to also lean into the societal effects and be a part of those solutions as well. And so for leaders, I think we have an opportunity here to continue to learn, continue to lean in, and pay attention to what OpenAI is doing and what Meta is doing and what Google is doing. And this technology innovation is going to impact our world, I believe, just as significantly as the internet has and as our mobile devices have, and maybe even more so. And so this is coming. This isn't kind of a quick trend. This isn't basically like a new website. This is intelligence that is being built into technology, and it's powerful and it's exciting and it's scary and it's overwhelming. And I think we've got to just lean in this moment and learn and prepare and adapt and adjust. And so I'm excited. I would love to know, what do you think about? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on this conversation. Thanks so much for listening and watching, and I look forward to connecting with you and growing with you together as we lean into social media technology, innovation, all the things, and become better leaders as we lean in to these technologies. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again on the next video.